She smirked. "You'll understand when you're older, I'm choosing him," then left forever. For a second, I honestly thought she was joking. My brain did this weird misfire where it tried to file it under dark humor, like she was about to crack a smile and say gotcha, and we'd both laugh at how insane it sounded. But she just adjusted the strap of her overnight bag higher on her shoulder, let her eyes slide over me like I was a mildly inconvenient piece of furniture, and walked past. The hallway light caught on the silver zipper of her suitcase as it rattled over the threshold. I felt my fingers twitch like they wanted to grab her wrist, but my feet wouldn't move. My whole body had that heavy, underwater feeling, like trying to run in a dream. "Ellie, wait," I heard myself say, voice coming out hoarse and too quiet. I took one stumbling step after her, bare feet freezing on the tiles. The door was open, cool evening air spilling in around her. She didn't turn. What does that even mean? When I'm older, my hand closed around her elbow. It felt fragile, all sharp bone under her coat. She jerked her arm out of my grip like my touch burned. That little smirk flickered across her face again, not a happy smile, not even a bitter one. It was worse than either of those. It was the kind of expression you give a kid who's crying because you didn't let them have a second ice cream. "Liam," she sighed, in that long-suffering tone she'd started using more lately, "I'm not doing this again. I'm done explaining it to you. I've made my decision." She tilted her chin towards the street, where the faint shape of a car idled by the curb. "He's waiting." I followed her gaze. Headlights washed pale light across the front steps, making her shadow stretch behind her. I could see the outline of a driver, him, hands resting on the steering wheel. My stomach lurched. This wasn't a hypothetical anymore, not some ugly fight we'd regret later. This was real. This was bags packed, car running, neighbors definitely hearing all of this through the thin townhouse walls. "You're choosing him," I repeated, a stupid echo. My tongue felt thick in my mouth. "After everything, you're just walking out." She rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Her fingers tightened around the handle of the suitcase. "You'll understand when you're older." Then, as if the conversation was over, she stepped out. The wheels bumped down the front step. She didn't look back. The door swung shut behind her with this soft, final click. It wasn't even a slam, just a gentle, polite ending that somehow made it worse. I stood there in the hallway, staring at the painted wood, hearing the muffled sound of the car door open, close, the engine shift from idle to moving. Some part of my brain registered the cat weaving around my ankles, meowing at the disturbance. I reached down blindly and felt fur under my fingers. My chest ached in this strange, hollow way, not sharp and dramatic like movies make heartbreak look, but like someone had scooped something out of me and left a cold, echoing space behind. It was a Tuesday evening, just after 7, and we'd been together for almost 6 years. I was 26, Ellie was 31. She'd always been the older one in our story, not just in years, but in everything. More put together, more experienced, more sure of who she was. When we met, that age gap felt exciting, flattering even. She used to joke that she was my cool older girlfriend, the one with the better music taste and an actual skincare routine. Somewhere along the way, though, that gap stopped being a joke and turned into a weapon she could use in moments like this, slicing me neatly out of her life with one condescending line. We met at the bookstore where I worked right after dropping out of uni the first time. I was 19, fresh off what my parents called my quarter-life crisis, even though I hadn't lived a quarter of my life yet, and I'd just quit an engineering degree I'd never wanted in the first place. I'd taken the job because I liked the smell of old paper, and because shelving books felt like the kind of quiet, low-stakes task you couldn't really screw up. It was a slow Wednesday afternoon in March. I remember because there was a leak in the ceiling over the sci-fi section, and my manager had put a bright yellow, caution, wet floor sign there that made the entire aisle look like it was under police investigation. I was behind the counter restocking bookmarks when she walked in. If this were a movie, I'd say everything went slow motion. It didn't, but I did notice her. She had that kind of presence that made you aware of her the moment she stepped through the door. Dark hair pulled up into a messy bun, a few strands escaping to brush her neck. Black jeans, battered boots, a denim jacket with a tiny enamel pin of a fox on the collar. She walked like she knew where she was going, then stopped abruptly in front of a display of self-help books and snorted under her breath. I watched her flip one over, read the blurb and mutter, "Yeah, because a guy named Chad can totally fix my trauma." I laughed before I could stop myself. She glanced up, caught my eye, and instead of doing the usual awkward look away, she smiled. Properly. "You agree?" she asked. "With the trauma bit or the Chad bit?" I said. "Both," she replied. She walked up to the counter and leaned on it like we were already mid-conversation. "Recommend me something that doesn't pretend I can manifest my way out of late-stage capitalism." I blinked. No crystals, got it. I turned to the shelves behind me, more to buy time than anything. "What are you into?" Fiction that doesn't make me want to stab myself with the bookmark, she said, and maybe something funny. I've had a week. I grabbed a couple of my favorites, a sharp, darkly funny novel about messy relationships and a collection of essays by some comedian that always made me wheeze. I plonked them on the counter. These won't fix your trauma, I said, but they might make you feel less alone with it. She tilted her head, looking at the covers, then back at me. Are you a therapist disguised as a minimum wage employee? I'm a guy who reads instead of dealing with his problems, I said. So close. That made her laugh, this quick, delighted burst that made something in my chest unclench. I'm Ellie, she said, holding out her hand, and you just made my day slightly less terrible. Liam, I replied, shaking her hand. Her palm was warm, her grip firmer than I expected. Happy to be of service. She came back the next week and the week after that. Sometimes she bought books, sometimes she just browsed and talked. I learned that she worked as a graphic designer at a small studio, that she was technically an adult, but still called her mum to ask how long chicken lasted in the fridge. That she'd moved to the city at 23 and never looked back. You're how old again? She asked one afternoon, head tilted as she watched me struggle to reach the top shelf. 19, I said, hopping down off the little step ladder. Why? She groaned, Gods, you're a baby. I bristled. I am not a baby, I said, probably proving her point. She grinned. Relax, I don't mean it like that. You just still have hope in your eyes. Wow, I said, rude and depressing. She laughed and bumped my shoulder with hers. It's cute, she said, in a please protect this child from the world kind of way. At the time, I thought she was flirting. Looking back, I guess it was the start of that dynamic, me as the slightly clueless younger guy, her as the worldly, knowing one. It didn't feel like a bad thing then. It felt exciting. Being around her made me feel like my life was a little bigger than the four walls of the bookstore. We got together about 3 months later, after my coworker convinced me to just ask her out, before she finds a guy with an actual career. I'd been circling the idea for weeks, too aware of the age gap, too sure she'd laugh it off. I caught her at the counter one evening as we were closing up. She'd come in just to say hi, and stayed 3 hours, sitting on the floor in the corner reading while I pretended to alphabetize. So, I said, heart pounding, there's this new ramen place that opened down the road. Their logo is terrible, but I heard the food is good. Want to, I don't know, investigate the typography sometime. She stared at me, then burst out laughing. Did you just ask me out on a critique date? Maybe. I felt my face go hot. You can say no, it's fine, I just... Yes, she cut in, then softer, I'd like that. On our first date, she ordered the spiciest thing on the menu and spent half the night dabbing at her eyes with a napkin, refusing to admit defeat. We talked about everything. Our families, our weirdest fears, the bands we'd pretend to like to impress someone. At one point she sat back, chopsticks hovering midair, and said, I can't believe you're 19. There it is again, I said, the age thing. She smiled, more gently this time. I just mean, you're surprisingly self-aware for someone who still thinks 2-minute noodles are a food group. Hey, I protested, they're versatile. She shook her head, amusement in her eyes. You're good for me, she said quietly. I like how you see things. That line lodged itself somewhere deep inside me. You're good for me. I wore it like armor for a long time. We fell into each other fast. Within 6 months, it felt strange to go a day without seeing her. She'd swing by the store on my breaks. I'd wait outside her studio with a coffee when she worked late. When my parents came into the city, she met them at a cafe and charmed them in 10 minutes flat, talking to my mum about recipes and my dad about some obscure indie band he loved. You're punching above your weight, my dad said later, half joking. I know, I told him, completely serious. Moving in together felt like the next obvious step. I'd finally told my parents I wasn't going back to engineering. I'm not wired for it. I tried to joke, which went down about as well as you'd expect, and they'd reluctantly accepted it. I picked up more shifts at the bookstore, started doing some freelance copywriting on the side. Ellie's career was picking up too. She'd gotten a promotion, more responsibility, clients that actually paid. We found a little 2-bedroom rental above a laundromat. The windows rattled when the washing machines downstairs spun, and the hot water had a personality disorder, but it was ours. We painted one wall in the living room a warm, ridiculous yellow because she said it made her feel like sunshine. We assembled IKEA furniture at midnight, arguing over the instructions, and then making up on the still unmade bed. The first year was good. Hard sometimes. We argued about money, about chores, about how often her friends came over and spilled drinks on the rug, but it felt like the kind of hard that meant something. We were building a life from scratch, learning each other's ugly moods, seeing what we both looked like without the filter of best behavior. The age difference came up in small ways. She'd drop references to bands I'd never heard of, talk about traveling to Europe at 21 while I'd barely left our state. When we went out with her friends, they were all just that bit more established, talking about career moves, mortgages, their friends, kids starting school, while I was still worrying about whether my shifts would be enough to cover my half of the rent. Mostly, though, it was a running joke. When you're my age, your knees will hurt like this too, she'd groan after a long hike. Okay, Grandma, I'd tease when she complained about Gen Z slang. We thought we were being self-aware about it, that we were beating the stereotype by acknowledging it. It started to shift around the time I turned 24. By then, Ellie was 29. She moved to a bigger design agency, one of those sleek places with exposed brick walls and an espresso machine worth more than my car. I'd left the bookstore and landed a job in a logistics company's marketing department. Not my dream, whatever that was, but decent pay and actual annual leave. On paper, things looked great. We both had full-time jobs. We'd fallen into a rhythm with bills and chores. Our friend groups had merged in that comfortable way where game nights didn't need formal invitations anymore. We talked idly about maybe getting a dog once our lease was up. But something under the surface was off. The first time I felt it clearly was at a dinner party with a couple Ellie knew from work, Paul and Marissa, and Paul's friend, Marcus. Marcus is coming too, Ellie had said that afternoon while stirring a pot of pasta sauce. You'll like him. He's funny. He reminds me of you, actually. Old, I joked. She flicked a bit of sauce at me. Rude, he's 38, that's not old. Compared to me, it is. You're a fetus, she said affectionately. Everyone is old compared to you. Marcus showed up with a bottle of expensive wine and a confidence that filled our tiny living room. Tall, grey at the temples in that annoyingly distinguished way, wearing a shirt that definitely didn't come from the discount rack. He dropped his keys on the counter like he'd been there 100 times. Liam Wright, he said, reaching out to shake my hand. His grip was firm, warm. Heard a lot about you. Likewise, I lied. I'd heard his name maybe twice. He was charming, I'll give him that. The kind of guy who made jokes that weren't actually that funny, but everyone laughed anyway because of how he delivered them. He asked me questions about my job that made it sound more interesting than it was. He talked to Ellie about a project they were both working on, their conversation peppered with industry jargon and names I didn't recognize. At one point, I went into the kitchen to grab more plates and heard their voices slightly lowered in the next room. You're seriously doing all-nighters again, Marcus was saying. Ellie laughed softly. Occupational hazard. Besides, you can't talk. You practically live at the office. Yeah, but I don't have someone waiting at home, he replied. You should be out having fun. You're too young to burn out. Tell that to my deadlines, she said. There was a pause, then her voice went softer. Anyway, Liam gets it. He's chill about it. I stood there with my hand on the cupboard door, heart twisting weirdly. She wasn't wrong. I wanted to be chill. But hearing myself described like some long-suffering golden retriever made something prick under my skin. After that night, Marcus became a more regular presence in our conversations. Marcus thinks we should pitch for the Greenleaf account, she'd say while brushing her teeth. Marcus says there's this great tapas place we all need to try. Marcus told me about this podcast you love. It mostly rolled off me. I knew she blended work and personal life more than I did. Her colleagues were like a second family. Mine were people I politely nodded at in the kitchen. Still, every time his name came up, that little bit of prickling under my skin got sharper. We fought more that year, not about Marcus, not directly, about dishes piling up because we were both exhausted, about family obligations, about money. I'd been a bit reckless with my spending when I got my first proper salary, and it caught up with us in a way that meant we had to dip into the savings she'd been building long before we got together. I feel like I'm dragging you along behind me sometimes, she said one night during one of those fights that start about something small and end up being about everything. Like I'm the only one thinking 2 steps ahead. That's not fair, I shot back. I'm trying, I'm working full-time, aren't I? I'm paying my share, most of the time, she said quietly. That hurt more than if she'd yelled. I'm doing my best, I said, voice cracking. She sighed, pressing fingers to her temples. I know, she said. I'm tired, Liam. Tired of feeling like the grown-up all the time. I'm 24, not 12, I snapped. You don't get it, she muttered. Then explain it, I said. Don't just throw out lines like that and shut down. But she did shut down. She went to bed without another word, leaving me alone on the couch with the dishes and my gnawing sense of inadequacy. In the months that followed, the gap between us widened in ways that were hard to name but easy to feel. She started dressing differently for work, blazers instead of her old band t-shirts, heels instead of sneakers. She stayed later at the office, went out for drinks with the team more often. When I texted asking when she'd be home, the answers were vague. A bit later, don't wait up. Her phone used to live face up on the coffee table, notifications popping up constantly. Now it spent more time in her pocket, face down, or flipped over next to her on the couch. If it buzzed and I glanced over, she'd move it without thinking, like a reflex. One night, some instinct I still hate myself for followed her into the bathroom when she left her phone charging in the bedroom. The screen lit up with a preview. Marcus, tonight was complicated. Call me when you can X. I stared at it, heart pounding in my throat. My first thought was not she's cheating, but maybe there's some work crisis. I picked the phone up. It was locked with a passcode I didn't know. She'd never had one before. When she came back into the bedroom and saw me holding it, her eyes flashed. "What are you doing?" she snapped. "It buzzed," I said weakly. "I just saw." I held the phone out like a guilty kid returning contraband. "What's complicated?" She snatched it, turned it to her chest. "Work stuff," she said. "Since when does your boss sign off work texts with a kiss?" The words came out before I could stop them. Her jaw tightened. "Marcus isn't my boss," she said, "and it's just a sign-off. Not everything is a big deal, Liam." My face burned. I didn't say it was a big deal, I just asked. "You don't trust me," she said flatly. "That's not true." "Then why are you interrogating me over a text?" "Because you've been distant for months," I burst out. "Because you're always with him or talking about him, and then I see that and I don't know what to think." She scoffed. "You're being paranoid. Marcus is a friend." "You used to tell me everything," I said quietly. "Now I have to find out things by accident." "You're the one going through my messages," she shot back. "Maybe you're the one who changed." We went to bed with our backs to each other that night, the air between us thick and sour. After that, I tried even harder to be, whatever it was she wanted. I picked up extra freelance work to chip away at the credit card debt. I started cooking more, cleaning more, planning little date nights at cheap restaurants. I even sat down one weekend and mapped out a vague 5-year plan because I thought maybe if I could show her I was serious about the future, she'd stop looking at me like I was stuck in some extended adolescence. "Look," I said one Sunday afternoon, spreading the scribbled notes out on the kitchen table. "If I keep going at this rate, I could maybe go back to study part-time next year. Marketing or comms, something that actually lines up with my job. Then I could move up in my company or jump somewhere else. We could save for a deposit in a few years. I'm not just winging it, okay? I'm thinking ahead." She scanned the papers, chewing the inside of her cheek. For a moment, something like the old warmth flickered in her eyes. "I appreciate this," she said. "Really, it means a lot that you're trying." "I'm not just trying," I said. "I want this with you." She smiled faintly, but there was a sadness to it. "I know you do," she murmured. At the time, I took that as encouragement. Looking back, it feels more like a farewell. The actual moment I knew, not suspected, not dreaded, but knew, happened 3 weeks before she left. It was stupidly mundane. She told me she had a team-building day that Saturday, some workshop thing followed by drinks. I'd made plans with Tom, my best friend, to binge-watch some terrible action movies and eat our body weight in nachos. Around 4 in the afternoon, I went into the study to grab a spare charger. Her work bag was on the chair, half-zipped. As I reached past it, something glossy slipped out and landed on the floor. It was a hotel brochure. The front showed a smiling couple clinking glasses in a rooftop bar. Inside, there was a booking confirmation tucked in the flap. 2 nights, 1 king room, 2 guests, the dates, that weekend. Under guest names, it said Marcus Hale plus Alina West. For a second, my brain refused to process the words. It was like looking at a recipe in another language. I recognized the letters but not the meaning. Then the floor seemed to tilt. I sat down hard on the edge of the chair, brochure shaking in my hands. Every hair on my arms stood up. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. It could be work, I thought desperately. Maybe there, I don't know, doing a conference, a client retreat, the kind where everyone gets rooms and nothing happens. But the brochure was for a place 2 hours drive away, somewhere coastal and fancy. Her team building was supposedly in the city. Also, I wasn't an idiot. I'd seen enough affairs play out on TV to recognize the script. I took photos of the brochure on my phone. I don't even know why. Maybe I thought I'd need evidence. proof that I wasn't imagining things, that I wasn't just being the jealous, immature boyfriend she accused me of being. When she got home that night, she smelled like hotel shampoo and a perfume I didn't recognize. She dropped her bag by the door and gave me a hug that felt more like a pat. "How was the workshop?" I asked, forcing my voice to sound casual. She shrugged out of her coat. "Boring," she said. "These things always are. And the drinks." "Fine, we didn't stay long." She walked past me into the kitchen. "Did you eat?" I stared at her back, at the hairline I used to kiss absent-mindedly while she made tea, at the curve of her neck, the freckle on her left shoulder. It all looked exactly the same and completely foreign. "Ellie," I said, my throat felt tight. "Can you look at me for a second?" She turned, frowning. "What's wrong?" I held up my phone, the photo of the brochure filling the screen. "What's this?" Her face went very still. It was like someone pressed pause, then she exhaled, long and slow. "Where did you get that?" "It fell out of your bag," I said. "You told me you had a team thing." She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again. When she spoke, her voice was oddly calm. "We needed to talk," she said. "I didn't know how to tell you without you making it into a drama." "We," I echoed. "Me and Marcus," she said. Something inside me cracked. "You and Marcus booked a romantic hotel for talking." She flinched at my tone. "Don't do that," she said. "Don't be sarcastic. I'm trying to be honest with you now." "Now," I repeated, laughing hollowly. "Cool. So how long have you been lying to me before this burst of honesty?" She looked away, jaw tight. "A while," she admitted. "It started as work drinks, venting. We have a lot in common. He understands what I'm going through." "And I don't," I said. She hesitated. "You try," she said, "but you haven't lived it. You don't know what it's like to be in my position. The pressure, the expectations. So you decided to start sleeping with your coworker instead of explaining that to your boyfriend," I said. Her eyes flashed. "Don't reduce it to that," she snapped. "It's not some sleazy fling. I felt like I'd been punched. Are you in love with him?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. That pause told me more than any words could. "Do you love him?" I asked again, voice barely above a whisper. She stared at the floor. "I don't know," she said finally. "I know I feel alive with him, seen, like I'm not just holding everything together for everyone else." The implication was clear. With me, she felt the opposite. "And what am I?" I asked, anger finally bubbling up through the hurt. "Practice, training wheels, something to keep you company until someone more age-appropriate came along." "That's not fair." She shot back. "I did love you. I still care about you. But we've grown in different directions, Liam. I can't keep pretending we haven't." I remembered all the times she'd said, "You don't get it," and "when you're my age," with that half-joking tone. Maybe she'd been testing the waters for this line for months. "So what now?" I asked. "You go back and forth between us until you're sure. You want an open relationship. You want me to just step aside." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I'm going to stay at my sister for a bit," she said. "Figure things out." "With him," I said. It wasn't a question. She didn't answer. That was 3 weeks ago. We circled each other like ghosts in our own house after that conversation, tiptoeing around the elephant in every room she'd already chosen. She just hadn't done me the courtesy of saying it out loud yet. Which brings us back to tonight, to the overnight bag, the car idling outside, her smirk as she dropped that line, "You'll understand when you're older," and left. In the days after she walked out, I went numb. There's no poetic way to describe it. Grief is not elegant. It's forgetting you left the kettle on until it burns dry. It's opening the fridge and staring at her oat milk for 10 minutes because you can't move your hand to pick it up. It's scrolling through old photos at 3 a.m. and having to put your phone on the other side of the room so you don't text her something pathetic like, "Please come home. I'll be more mature, I promise." Tom came over the next night with beer and takeaway, and that cautiously sympathetic face people wear when they're not sure if you're going to cry on them or punch a wall. She actually said that. He asked after I'd told him the whole story, mimicking her tone. "You'll understand when you're older, I'm choosing him." Verbatim, I said. My voice sounded flat in my own ears. "What a wanker thing to say," he muttered, then catching himself. "Sorry, I know you still, you know." "It's fine," I said. "You can call her a wanker." I called her worse in my head. He took a swig of beer. "You didn't deserve that, man." I shrugged, staring at the steam rising from the plastic container of curry. "Maybe I did," I said. "Maybe I was some childish phase she should have grown out of years ago." "Don't start," he warned. "I'm serious," I said. She was always the organized one, the adult. I was the idiot who forgot to pay the water bill. Maybe she just got sick of dragging me. Or maybe she met a guy who flattered her ego and let her blame all her dissatisfaction on you being younger, he said, so she could jump ship without feeling like the bad guy. I hated how good that sounded, how plausible. The thing is, Ellie was not a cartoon villain. She wasn't some mustache-twirling cheat who set out to hurt me. She was also the girl who held my hand at my grandfather's funeral, who sat with me all night when I had a panic attack about failing at life, who once spent 2 hours on the phone talking me down from quitting my job after a rough meeting. It would be so much easier if she'd been awful from the start. Then I could put her in a neat, bad X box and light it on fire. Instead, I had to live with two truths at once. She loved me and she betrayed me. She helped me grow, and she also used my growing as an excuse to outgrow me. About a month after she left, I ran into her by accident. Of course it was at the worst possible place, the grocery store. I was in the cereal aisle, debating between the cheap brand and the one with the cartoon mascot, when I heard her laugh. You don't forget the laugh of someone you've been in love with. It cuts through any background noise like a tuning fork. I turned before my brain could tell me not to. She was at the other end of the aisle, hand on a trolley, looking at something on a shelf. Marcus was next to her, his hand resting casually on the small of her back. They looked normal, like any other couple comparing unit prices. For a moment, it was like watching a version of my life from a parallel universe where I'd been older, steadier, chosen instead. She glanced up and saw me. Her face went through a rapid shift. Recognition, guilt, that tiny flash of panic, then a smooth settling into something neutral. "Hey," she said, voice a little too bright. "Liam, hi." I nodded because my vocal cords had apparently left the building. "Hey." Marcus turned, following her gaze. He looked between us, putting two and two together. "Hi," he said, "you must be Liam," I finished for him. "Yeah, the ex." His mouth tightened. "Right." There was an awkward silence. I became hyper-aware of the fluorescent lights, the faint beep of a barcode scanner somewhere nearby, the fact that I was holding a box of cereal with a cartoon tiger on it. "How are you?" Ellie asked. "Fine," I lied automatically. She nodded like she didn't quite believe me, but also didn't want to dig. "Good, that's good," Marcus coughed. "We should." "Yeah," she said quickly, "we should go. Take care, okay?" "You too," I said. They walked away. Her hand slipped into his like it was the most natural thing in the world. I watched them turn the corner and disappear between the canned goods and the pasta. For the first time since she left, I didn't feel that sharp, twisting pain. It was more like a dull ache. Watching them together, I realized something that should have been obvious sooner. They didn't look like villains in my story. They just looked like two people getting groceries. I left the cereal in my basket and walked out without buying anything. Sat in my car in the parking lot for a solid 10 minutes, hands shaking on the steering wheel. Then I took a breath, started the engine, and drove home. The next day in therapy, I told Sarah, my therapist, about it. "And," she asked gently, "what did you feel seeing them?" "Like I was watching my replacement in real time," I said. "Like I was this draft she upgraded from." She nodded. "That's a painful image." "Also," I admitted, like I understood her a little more. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Not in a yay-cheating way," I hurried to clarify. Just I could see what she meant when she said he gets her. They're from the same world now, same stage of life. They talk about mortgage rates and client pitches and whatever. I used to joke about how she'd talk over my head sometimes. Maybe she got tired of that gap. "And where does that leave you?" Sarah asked. Feeling like I was a lower level in a video game she had to beat before unlocking the next stage, I said, half joking. She smiled sadly, "Or like you were the right person for her at a certain time, and then both of you changed." "Everyone keeps saying that," I muttered. "People change, you grew apart." It feels like a cop-out, like no one wants to admit that sometimes people just decide they can trade up. "Maybe it's both," she said. Maybe she changed in ways that made her more likely to make the choices she did. Maybe you changed too. Maybe you outgrew parts of that dynamic as well, even if you didn't want to let go. I thought about all the times she'd called me a baby, the kid, you'll get it when you're older. It had been cute at first. It stopped being cute when it became a way to dismiss my feelings. "You know what really pisses me off now," I said. "That line, 'You'll understand when you're older.' Like she's some wise sage and I'm a clueless idiot. Like wanting someone not to cheat on you is a sign of immaturity." Sarah nodded. "What do you think she meant by it?" "That one day I'd look back and go, Ah yes, of course she had to choose the more successful, older guy who understood her workload, I said bitterly, like I'd be grateful or something. Do you think that'll happen? She asked. I hesitated. I think I might understand parts of it, I admitted. I already get that she felt like the adult all the time, that I leaned on her more than I should have, that she wanted someone who felt like an equal, not a project. I can own my side of that. And the rest? The rest, I sighed, the rest is still bullshit. We both laughed and it felt good. Time did its slow, weird thing. Some days I barely thought about her. Others I'd smell a particular shampoo on the bus and be catapulted back to our bathroom, watching her wrap her hair in a towel. I deleted most of our photos off my phone, but I kept a few tucked away in a hidden folder, not because I wanted to torture myself, but because erasing her felt dishonest. She was a huge part of my 20s, whether I liked it or not. I started saying yes to more things that had nothing to do with her. A hiking trip with Tom and his girlfriend, a board game night with my colleagues, a pottery class my neighbor dragged me to when she had a spare spot. Turns out I'm terrible at pottery, but there was something therapeutic about smashing the lopsided bowl I'd made and starting again. Little by little, my life stopped feeling like the empty space where Ellie used to be, and started feeling like mine. A few weeks ago, I got a message from an unknown number. Hey, it's Ellie, got your new number from Tom. Don't be mad at him, I asked very nicely. Just wanted to say I'm sorry again, and that I heard you went back to study. I'm genuinely happy for you. You always had more in you than you gave yourself credit for. I know my opinion probably doesn't matter much anymore, but I'm proud of you, that's all. I stared at it for a long time. The old me would have replied immediately, trying to keep some fragile connection alive. The newly slightly older me put my phone down, went for a walk around the block, then came back and thought about what I actually wanted. I ended up writing. Hey, thanks, I'm doing okay. Studying part-time, yeah. Trying to be a bit more grown-up, I guess. I accept your apology. I'm not going to pretend it didn't screw me up, but I'm not walking around hatting you anymore. I hope you're okay too, take care. I didn't ask about Marcus. I didn't ask if she was happy if he got her the way I never did, partly because I didn't actually want the answer, and partly because it didn't feel like my business anymore. She replied a few minutes later. That's more grace than I deserve. Thank you, I'll leave you alone now. And that was that. Sometimes I think about that kid in the bookstore who thought being chosen by an older, cooler woman meant he was special, mature, ahead of the curve. I want to tell him, you're not a project. You're not a stepping stone. You're allowed to grow at your own pace without someone dangling, when you're older, over your head like a carrot and a stick at the same time. I also think about Ellie younger, before the overtime and the pressure and the Marcus-shaped exit ramp. I liked that version of her a lot. I think she did too. Somewhere along the way, she started measuring her life in benchmarks, career, house, family, and I became one more thing that wasn't matching the timeline. That doesn't justify what she did, but it does make it less of a mystery. The funny thing is, I did get older. Not in any dramatic, I'm a whole new person way, but in the slow accumulation of days where I choose to keep going. I pay my bills on time now. I book my own dentist appointments. I'm halfway through a part-time degree and I actually hand in assignments early sometimes. I apologize when I screw up without needing someone to drag it out of me. And from this slightly higher vantage point on the hill of age, I can look back at that moment in the hallway, her smirk, her line, her leaving, and say, no, I don't understand the way you meant. I understand what you did. I understand why, in the broad, human sense of wanting more, wanting to feel alive, wanting someone who mirrors your favorite parts of yourself back to you. But I don't agree that the only way to get there is to burn down what you have with someone who loved you and talk to him like he's a child who will get it when he grows up. If anything, getting older has made me less okay with that, not more. I'm not writing this because I want strangers on the internet to tell me she's trash, and I'm better off, though, not going to lie, my ego won't mind if you do. I'm writing it because that one sentence lodged in my chest and sat there, heavy and poisonous, for months. I kept wondering if she was right, if being upset about how she left meant I was immature. It doesn't. Love is not something you trade for thrills or understanding, without leaving shrapnel behind. If you're unhappy, you either do the hard, vulnerable work of trying to fix it with the person you're with, or you leave as honestly and kindly as you can before climbing into someone else's bed. Anything else isn't wisdom. It's just cowardice dressed up as enlightenment. So yeah, she smirked, said her line, and left forever. And I stayed in this life, in this body, in this stupid little apartment with its rattling windows and yellow wall. I stayed long enough to see that her choice doesn't define my worth. I stayed long enough to see that older doesn't automatically mean right, and that growing up isn't about being chosen by the better person, It's about choosing yourself when someone shows you they're willing to throw you away. I don't know who needs to hear this, but if someone ever looks you in the eye and tells you you'll understand when you're older, while they walk out of your life for someone else, you don't have to wait for some future version of yourself to validate your pain. You're allowed to understand right now that what they're doing is selfish. You're allowed to hurt. You're allowed to be angry. And you're allowed, eventually, to build a life so full and grounded that the only thing you feel when you think of them is a quiet, distant relief that you're not the one still trying to justify hurting someone in the name of growing.